Thank you, Rena. I have no idea what she said about me. So I'll use a line I borrowed from President Jimmy Carter. I heard him speak recently, and what he said is, "That's the nicest introduction I've had recently." So thank you for being here, for having me here. It's a great pleasure to be back in Estonia, back in the beautiful city of Tallinn. And so I don't know how much Rena told you. Just to begin with, to restate the obvious, people get in trouble with alcohol because they drink too much, or they drink too much very often, or they drink too much very steadily. And if there is a protective effect from light drinking, in most well-resourced countries, it's very rare for people to drink in a way that they would be protected. And there is no protective effect for people under age 44. So the bottom line with alcohol is the amount of alcohol problems in a country will rise with the consumption of alcohol, which is how we justify taking measures at the population level generally. The way we measure the toll of alcohol as well as other things is through something called disability-adjusted life years. These are years of life lost to either death or disability. And if we look globally, alcohol is number 5 among the conditions that have been estimated by the World Health Organization. It's number 3 for men. It's much further down the list for women, although that is rising. For the age group 15 to 24, alcohol is the leading cause of death and disability in every region of the world except the Eastern Mediterranean because of Islam. Rena's already talked about this, I think, but these are 30 European countries, and you can see Estonia, this is 15 and 16-year-olds. Estonia is just above average. The US is right at the bottom. We drink much less than most other countries, and our young people reflect that. The progress that we've been able to make, even though the US drinks less, we have a problem. We think we have a significant problem. This is the progress that we've made among our high school students. This is roughly 12 to 18-year-olds. And you can see things have been heading in the right direction in, the last 15 years. We're highly protected by our 21-year-old drinking age, purchase age. That does mean that our young people drink less, and the better we enforce that, the less they drink. That was up to the 18-year-olds. If you include the 18 to 20-year-olds, things don't look quite as good. And this is a group, the college-age young people in particular, is a group that we've had difficulty making progress with. This is one set of curves that concerns me greatly. I've studied alcohol all over the world. It takes a tremendous amount to change an alcohol culture. And in the US, the alcohol culture among young people is changing. This is the beverage preference of our 17 and 18-year-old female binge drinkers. Up until about the year 2000, like our boys, they mostly drank beer. It's cheapest, it's most widely available, but around 2000, they switch. And suddenly, and since then, they've been more likely to drink distilled spirits than they are to drink beer. I will refer back to this later. The reason it concerns us is because if young people are experimenting, we don't want them experimenting with the most powerful form of the drug on the market. There's a strong public health interest, as I think Rena said, in delaying the onset of drinking. Young people who start drinking before age 15 in the US are 5 times more likely to develop an alcohol problem, 4 times more likely to become addicted, 6 times to be more likely to be in a physical fight after drinking or a motor vehicle crash. So our goal is to delay onset. Every year in the US, we lose about 5,000 young people. Rena talked about the brain. These are magnetic resonance images of two young people, a 15-year-old non-drinker and a 15-year-old heavy drinker 6 weeks after detoxification. This is the activity in the brain when they're asked a very simple memory question. You want a lot of activity. That's what you see in the non-drinker. You see very little activity in the drinker. We don't know how reversible this is. These same studies have also found that the young people who drink more heavily are more likely to fire, to have activity in their brains in the areas of the brain linked to reward, positive affect, episodic recall in response to alcoholic beverage advertisements. And the more they drink, the more they respond to the ads. Now, we can't say from this which is causing which. Are the heavy drinkers more responsive to the ads, or do the ads cause the drinkers to something to make them drink more heavily? But it's of interest. The only way we can figure out which came first is to do longitudinal studies, where we follow groups of young people over time, starting from when most of them are not drinking. We measure their exposure to various kinds of media at baseline and at various points along the way. We've got more than 15 of these studies that have been done in various countries so far. They've all found that the more young people are exposed to alcohol advertising and marketing of various kinds, the more likely they are to start drinking, or if already drinking, to drink more. These studies have looked at a wide variety of forms of marketing, alcohol advertisements in magazines, on television, on radio, on billboards, in-store beer displays and sports concessions, alcohol use in the movies, and probably the most powerful one so far, alcohol promotional items. Young people who own a t-shirt, a baseball cap, flip-flops, and so on, that have an alcohol logo on it are 50% more likely to start drinking than young people who don't. I like to say that this slide is self-explanatory. One of the research groups in the US sought to find out what it is about alcohol advertising that is attractive to young people. And it turns out that young people don't care about where the ingredients came from. They don't care about how long the product was aged or what kind of barrels it was aged in. In alcohol advertising, young people want music, people, story, and humor. If those are in the ad, they're more likely to like the ad. If they like the ad, they're much more likely to think that good things will happen when you drink. And this development of positive expectations is what predicts intentions to drink as an adult or to drink next year. But it's also very interesting, if they like the ad, they're also more likely to think that their peers are drinking and that their peers approve of drinking. And this then predicts current drinking. So part of what the ads seem to do in a young person's mind is they amplify the peer effect that's already there, or in some cases create an artificial peer group for young people. They powerfully give the message, everyone is doing it. So here's an example of music, character, and story in an alcohol ad from the US.
They say you don't know what you want, that you have to get your act together, that it's time to find a direction in your life. And they say that you should find somebody. Oh yeah? Who said? What's most important is being you. Budweiser, true.
There's another research group in the US that is also trying to model what happens with young people. and how they develop drinker identities. They initiate alcohol use after being exposed. They notice the marketing. They start to remember and recognize the marketing. The more they do that, the more likely they are to like the marketing. This coincides with initiation to alcohol use and the beginning of a progression to problem drinking. They then begin to participate in the marketing. They may do this through branded clothing, etc. They may also do this through participation in social media, communicating their preferences to their friends. They develop brand allegiance, and then that ultimate thing in social media, they become a voluntary brand ambassador. They market the product to their friends. The advertising research so far has looked very generally at young people's exposure to alcohol marketing, but we know that marketing occurs not generally, it occurs by brand. And different brands aim for different segments of the population. So I'm actually somewhat amazed that the studies find effects, given that they've looked across the whole range of products. What I think we'll find if we can focus on brands is we'll find even stronger effects. So we've started trying to do that in the US. We just completed the first ever national survey of young people's alcohol consumption by brand. We have close to 900 brands of alcohol in the US. We were able to do this on the computer with drop-down lists and everything, and managed to get this under 25 minutes. And just the beginnings of our findings, this is just the males and the females and what they drink in the US. And the ones under the females that are highlighted in red, it's to point out that the boys are still mostly drinking beer. But the girls have shifted substantially to the alcopops, the light alcohol beverages that have spirits name on them, like Smirnoff Ice and Bacardi Breezer and Bacardi Silver, and to the distilled spirits, the vodkas and the tequila. We're looking at this in lots of different ways. One possible explanation is that young people are just drinking what adults drink. We've compared this youth market to data we have on the adult market. Young people are drinking distinctively young beverages. They're 7 times more likely to be drinking Smirnoff malt beverages. They're 44 times more likely to be drinking these Jack Daniel's cocktails, which are pre-mixed low alcohol cocktails. 9 times more likely to be drinking Corona Light, and so on. We're starting to put our brand data together with some of our exposure data that we gathered on this survey. So we have a basket of questions we asked them about exposure to alcohol advertisements on television. When we put that together with the brand data, when we control for a wide variety of other variables, what we find is that young people were 3 times more likely to consume a brand if they were exposed to its advertising. So through the brand data, we're trying to make the connections more precise, more clear. So I should probably say a little bit about my center, what we do. I run something called the Center on Alcohol Marketing and Youth. We looked across what was happening on alcohol in the US in the year 2000. We could see lots of good work happening, reducing the access of youth to alcohol. In particular, better enforcement of our 21-year-old purchase age and things like that. We saw very little work on the appeal of alcohol to young people. So this is the niche that we tried to fill. In the US context, we have very strong protections for advertising, for commercial speech. So banning advertising is very difficult to do. The only reason we have a ban on tobacco advertising is because of a lawsuit that was brought by the chief legal officer of 48 of our 50 states. They brought a big suit against the tobacco companies, and as part of the settlement of that lawsuit, the tobacco companies agreed not to advertise most advertising. So that's a voluntary agreement they entered into, but it's not in statute. So on the alcohol side, mostly what we have is self-regulation, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Our underage drinking, even though it is declining, it is still somewhere between 11 and 20% of the market. Young people drink less frequently than adults in the US, but they tend to drink more per occasion. And at least 2/3 of the alcohol they consume is drunk on occasions when they're drinking to intoxication. Mostly young people in the US are not having a glass of wine with their parents at dinner. Mostly young people use alcohol as a drug of intoxication. So I mentioned self-regulation. We have fairly detailed codes from our alcohol industry trade associations that the industry agrees to abide by. I'm going to show you some provisions from the codes and some examples of alcohol advertising in the US, and I will let you be the judge. So the Distilled Spirits Council Code says advertising should not contain any lewd or indecent images in language. It's a little hard to see, but how many of you think that is a violation of their code? Let me see a show of hands. Do you think that's a violation of the code? It's a picture of a man staring at a woman's crotch. What do you think? Code violation, or it's just fine? Code violation. This is when you get to have exercise. Okay. All right. They're supposed to only use actors that are at least 25 years old and should reasonably appear to be over 21. These are taste ambassadors. This is brand uploaded photos from the Miller Lite Facebook page. They're very cute over here. Amanda's age is question mark. But Jessica's age right there, it says Jessica is 21. All right, how many of you think that's a code violation? Yeah, I should see all of your hands. She's 21. She's supposed to be 25. Okay, more lewd and indecent. Do you know what your O face is in English? It's the face you make when you reach sexual climax. Yes, clearly. And then this one's a little hard to see here, but she is on her knees adjusting her lipstick in her boyfriend's shiny belt buckle. Why is she on her knees? Why does she need to adjust her lipstick? I know, I have a very dirty mind. Code violation? How many of you think? Yeah. Oh. They're not supposed to use Santa Claus. Okay? These are, again, brand uploaded photos from the Captain Morgan Facebook page. They're supposed to only depict alcohol use in situations where alcohol is being consumed responsibly, never to encourage excessive consumption. This is actually a responsibility ad from Smirnoff. It says know your limit, and then it has 4 bottle caps. No, 4. Believe me, I've counted. They're hard to see. 4 bottle caps. Now, the daily limit in the US is 1 drink for women and 2 drinks for men. And a binge for us is 4 drinks for women on occasion, or 5 drinks for women for men. So this could be plus. Smirnoff comes in 2 different package sizes in the US, 8.5 ounces and 16 ounces. If these were caps from the larger bottles, this was as much as 5 times the limit for women. All right. They're not supposed to claim or represent that individuals can attain social, professional, educational, or athletic success or status as a result of alcohol consumption.
Your original.
Uh-oh. I don't know why it's doing that. It's not happy. Let's try it again.
You're the original. We want double of you. And there's no foods around.
All right. played fine before. It says, when you're on top, people want you. People want a big chunk of you. It's all you, you, you. Pinnacle vodka. It's more fun on top. All right. So, and then social media raises the question, what is an advertisement? In social media, the brands become people. They interact with the target audience. So this is a product that is sold in a 23.5-ounce container that's close to, it's over 700 milliliters of 12.5% alcohol, sold as a single serving. For us, that's the equivalent of between 4 and 5 beers, sold as a single serving. And this is them interacting with their users on their Facebook page. Yesterday, we asked about your first time with juice. Now we want to hear about the morning after juice. Walk of shame, anyone? Tell us a good morning after story. Adam. In the past 6 years, I've made spaghetti 2 times. One of the best juice nights ever, I woke up naked on my couch with a full plate of spaghetti and half a juice in front of me. Trashed the spaghetti, finished the juice. So this is a person describing an alcoholic blackout. This is clearly someone with an alcohol problem. Now, how does juice respond? Should have saved the spaghetti for the inevitable fourth meal cravings. And how did half a juice get you naked on the couch? Let's just say that half juice was not juice number 1 of the night. Tyler, midnight vomit all over the wall and not knowing about it until the next day and having to clean it up with a major hangover. Again, alcoholic blackout, vomiting, clear overconsumption. Juice's response, laugh out loud. Not exactly responsible brand communication. And then in social media, we also have the problem of what is an ad. And these aren't showing up very well at all, but she's got everything. These are user-generated ads, photos that are up on social media pages sponsored by the alcohol companies. In this one, they're drinking Jim Beam whiskey with a straw out of the bottle, not exactly a safe way to consume it. And what effect do these images have? Again, mostly the advertising research has just looked at exposure. But we've got one very interesting study that was just done in San Jose, California. We have these big studies in the US that have looked at the number of alcohol outlets in a city, measured those by neighborhood, by block group, by census tract, and then tied those with the data on consequences, with things like homicide, violence, assault, things like that. And these studies all find the more outlets you have, the more likely you are to have more homicide, more assaults, more violence against women, and so on. So one of the researchers who does that work joined with another researcher who had mapped all of the advertising for alcohol that was visible outside in the city of San Jose and had coded it by block group. They did the traditional study where they looked at violence against women and they looked at the alcohol outlets, and sure enough, the more the outlets, the higher the levels of violence towards women. But when they put the ads in, and in particular, when they looked at the ads that featured Latina models in highly sexualized positions, which is usually the way they're shown in alcohol ads, that they wiped out the effect of the alcohol outlets, and the presence of the ads was now a powerful predictor of the levels of sexual violence, not only against Latinas, but also against non-Latina females. This is obviously just one study. It needs to be replicated. We'll be trying to do that. What my center does specifically is we try to answer the question, how much alcohol advertising are young people seeing? It was our clever idea to buy the same data that alcohol companies use to plan their marketing campaigns. So we buy Nielsen. In the US, we buy Arbitron for radio, and so on. And we backtrack through that What our studies have found is that over and over again, the alcohol ads are showing at times when young people are more likely than adults to be watching. So, for instance, in magazines, in 2008, compared to adults 21 and over, young people 12 to 20 saw 10% more beer ads, 16% more ads for Alcopops, and interestingly, 73% fewer ads for wine, which suggests it's possible to find the adult audience without massively overexposing the young people. On television, that doesn't want to go away. On television, we looked at 315,000 placements on US television in 2009. Young people were more likely than adults per person to see about 21% of those, about 67,000 ads. The average TV watching 12 to 20-year-old in the US in 2009 saw 366 alcohol ads. That's an average of 1 alcohol ad per day. The US government says, parents, talk to your children about alcohol. It's very difficult for a parent to keep up with that level of sophisticated, well-produced conversations about how great it is to drink that alcohol companies are having with our children in my country. On the radio, again, about a third of the ads were on programming that young people were more likely to be listening to than adults. And again, this is branded. It's a very small group of brands that are responsible for most of this overexposure of young people. 5% of the brands on magazine, 8% on television, 4% on radio, responsible for half or more of youth exposure in those media. So at this point, I'll just ask you, how many of you think on the basis of this data that the alcohol industry is targeting young people? Okay, but you haven't heard that from me.
It's not they are selectively targeting with certain brands and certain products. To be fair.
Okay, but you still haven't heard that from me because the word target in English implies intent. And we knew tobacco companies were intentionally targeting young people because we got the inside documents that said, we're targeting young people. We don't have those inside documents for alcohol. So the next best thing we can do to go after this question of targeting is to do regression studies where we test alternative hypotheses. Is there some other reason so many of the ads are ending up where young people are watching? Is it because that's the cheapest place to advertise? Is it because that's where the young adults are and the industry is simply shooting for young adults and accidentally reaching a lot of young people? Well, we've controlled for both of those in various studies. The cable TV study we did, we looked at over 600,000 placements on cable television in the US. Even after we controlled for the price of the ad and the number of young adults in the audience, we still found that every 1 point increase in the percent of the audience that was adolescent was associated with 7% more beer ads, 15% more spirits ads, and 22% more ads for Alcopops per viewer hour, but again, fewer wine ads. All right, now the industry comes back to me and they say, well, you're not being fair because you're just looking at the product advertising and we do all this great responsibility advertising. I've shown you one. Here's another one. Let's see if it'll play. Oh, I'm not sure why it's doing that. It's not happy. The speaker's not happy. Yeah, no. There's something wrong with the speaker. Anyway, I can do that ad from memory. You could see the imagery, I think. Yeah, can you hear this? Do you know anything about this speaker? It's just sitting here clicking. I think it's a dead speaker. Sure, and I'll see if I can play it from here. All right. Well, she's saying, I might take a limo. Then again, I might take a jet. But whatever I do, I'm going to get home safely. Okay, so in public health, we would call that a mixed message. Advertising how wonderful it is to drink, but definitely get your own limo or your own jet. But it doesn't really matter. We've measured youth exposure to these ads as well. Young people are about 22 times more likely to see a product ad for alcohol than any of the industry-branded responsibility ads. So the bottom line, whether intentional or not, we find in the US that the alcohol ads pervasively, particularly beer and spirits, pervasively overexposed our young people to alcohol advertising. And that these overexposing ads are responsible for a substantial portion of young people's exposure to alcohol advertising. But I should say, our work, my presentation, has only looked at one small slice of the marketing and promotion picture. We haven't looked at product placement, sponsorship, spring break marketing, campus marketing, sports marketing, point of purchase, and so on. And so just briefly, looking at the product development. This is a very innovative industry. In the US, they test more than 250 products per year, new products. So the Alcopops, you have Alcopops here? Yes? Okay. Well, when they first showed up in the US, the industry said they were designed for entry-level drinkers. 85% of people in the US start drinking before 21. So those are your entry-level drinkers. And people who don't like the taste of beer, read females. Okay? In colleges on the US, these are known as chick beer. They claimed in the US that even though they had spirits names on them, like Smirnoff and Bacardi, they claimed that they were made from malt. And the reason for this is that we tax beer much lower in the US, and you could advertise it on television at that time, and it's much more widely available than spirits. The next generation of Alcopops were high alcohol, flavored alcoholic beverages. These are like juice that I talked about, 12% alcohol. They were first only 5 to 6% in 12-ounce bottles, but the second generation what we call a binge in a can. And that's what some of them look like. That's a picture off of the Juice Facebook page. Again, very responsible marketing, not. For a while in the US, they were adding caffeine and other stimulants to these beverages. And again, the state attorneys general brought a couple of legal actions against a couple of companies, shut down the biggest ones, and then managed to convince our Federal Food and Drug Administration to ban them from adding stimulants to malt-based beverages in the US. So most of these we don't have anymore. We just have the product itself. No stimulants in it, but still 12% alcohol sold in a 23.5-ounce can. What we know about the Alcopops was that at the height of their popularity in 2004, they were most popular with the youngest drinkers. 78% of our 12 and 13-year-old drinkers, 71% of 15 and 16-year-olds, 65% of 17 and 18-year-old drinkers, and only 42% of drinkers ages 19 to 20 had an Alcopop in the last 30 days, and they were most popular with the youngest drinkers. And then these are just a couple of other images from the For Loco Facebook page at this point. They're hard to see, but it's hard to believe that either of those young women is over 25, or even over 21, or even over 18. And what this kind of marketing looks like today, this is a very recent one. The tagline, "Why fit in when you were born to stand out?" And do you know who Dr. Seuss is? He's arguably the most famous children's book author in the US. So Moving to product placement, a recent study found that in the US, in the movies, mentions of tobacco and depictions of smoking have fallen dramatically in the last 10 years. Alcohol appearances, drinking occasions, brands of alcohol have risen steadily at the same time. Anheuser-Busch was in Wedding Crashers, Batman Begins, Spider-Man, Terminator 3, Dodgeball, and so on. Moving on to social media. This is very challenging for us in that we can't get the same kind of data for social media that we can for television, for radio, for magazines. I can get the demographics of everybody that's on Facebook, and that means nothing. I cannot get the demographics of everybody who's on the Captain Morgan Facebook page, or the Smirnoff Ice Facebook page, or so on. So, and we know that young people are far ahead of adults in their comfort in social media, and we know that the alcohol companies are among the earliest adopters of the new technologies that are available in social media to increase user engagement. So one of the things we've done recently is we licensed an app that crawls through the pages and simply counts all the activity. And we've measured the activity of the 10 brands that from our survey are most popular among young people. Again, really dramatic takeoff in user engagement with these brands starting about 18 months ago. These are likes, these are shares, again, around the same time. Activity just explodes. The companies are getting much better at promoting this. Posting of user photos started growing earlier, but again, lots of activity here. Thousands of user-generated photos. People putting up their photos on these branded Facebook pages. And we don't know the age of the people who are putting these photos up. Again, these are a little hard to read, but if you look closely at them, these are photos that users have put up on alcohol company Facebook pages. It is very hard to believe that any of these users are of the legal age to purchase alcohol. So just one more quick look at developments in alcohol marketing in the US. Increasingly, foods generally in the US are being sold as functional. So you have potato chips being sold as a functional food. Well, in alcohol, we have natural vodka. We have natural beer. We have vodka from soy. It's gluten-free. Organic tequila. Natural tequila. You worry about what unnatural tequila would be. Oh, this is natural juice. Believe me, there is almost nothing natural about this product, but it's made with real natural fruit flavors. This is one of Juice's competitors. You're not allowed to make a health claim about alcohol here in the US. So they're not making a claim about the alcohol, they're making a claim about the wild Brazilian berry uva, part of the grape family. It has been revered for centuries for its mystical healing powers. With 12% alcohol by volume, blended with the flavor of the ancient uva berry, Loco Uva is truly a mind-blowing experience.
You cannot do that in the European Union.
Well, they're not supposed to do it in the US either. I mean, they're not allowed to make health claims, but they argue they're not making a health claim about the alcohol. They're making a health claim about the grape.
Yeah, but even here, we just had a year or two ago a court case with a wine. The wine producer tried to pull off the same trick and didn't work.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So who knew that alcohol was a fitness drink? Tell them you've hired a personal trainer from Holland because you drink Amstel Light. Beer contains antioxidants. It makes you smart. It's the beer to drink when you're running a marathon. And it's a diet drink. Okay, it's low calorie. It's the lightest beer in the world. It advertises on the Weight Watchers Facebook page. Do you have Weight Watchers here? It's a very popular diet program. 56 calories means you can be good and still have a good time. the lightest beer in the world. Even the can is slim. No carbs. No carbs, no question. Okay, that's the US. Now here we are in Tallinn. I took this picture in 1996. It is hard to read, I'm sorry. Do you remember these ads? It was a huge campaign. Saku beer was one of the beers that was made in Estonia long before independence, or re-independence. And in the mid-1990s, Carlsberg got control of the brand and brought in a Finnish marketing manager, and I got to interview him. And, you know, he said, we came to Estonia, we looked at the market. Traditionally, Estonian women did not drink beer. And we saw this as a huge opportunity. So this is a picture, it was all over Tallinn, of a woman holding a glass of saku with a man behind her with his hand around her hand on the beer glass. Dramatizing, yes, it's okay. You too can drink beer. The other story about saku is, and this is what he told me, is that they also got control of the leading beer in Lithuania, and they marketed them both heavily. They used exact same recipe for both beers, but convinced everyone that saku was the Estonian one and that the other one was the Lithuanian one. Okay, which leads me to my next. When I was doing my dissertation research, I talked to lots of industry executives. This is the CEO of the largest beer company in Southeast Asia, and this is what he said to me: a beer is a beer is a beer. So therefore, it's all about brands. We're not selling beer, we're selling image. People literally drink the marketing. And this is part of why the marketing is so important to this industry and why they fight very, very hard against any efforts to restrict their ability to market. Their brands are, of their essence, marketed brands. Okay, so what can we do? The World Health Organization in 2010 passed a global strategy to reduce alcohol-related harm. This was a big step forward for our field. 10 areas for activity, including the 3 that are highlighted here, which WHO referred to as the best buys. These are the ones that research says are going to be the most effective in reducing alcohol problems. And so the first is to reduce the availability of alcohol. And I have to say, you know, I walked over with Kit, and he asked me, how did Tallinn look compared to when I was here, 17 years ago? And I said the first thing I noticed was there were far fewer places to buy alcohol. That when I was here in 1995, people were literally selling alcohol out of holes in the wall. You'd walk along a street and there'd be 3 places to buy alcohol. And that has changed. So reducing the availability, restricting the marketing, and then pricing policies.
To be just a consultant, it is what we have managed to do is to close sales from kiosks in these holes. However, the number of shops selling alcohol and the number of bars, this has definitely increased from 1996.
So you have more shops and bars, but fewer kiosks. Yeah, but you had so many kiosks.
Because we didn't have supermarkets back then yet. And you haven't visited the harbor area.
I haven't visited the harbor area yet. I have so much to look forward to. All right, the third one is pricing policies. There's a huge literature that shows that if you're in reasonable control of the market, that is, if there's not a lot of informal production, if there's not a lot of smuggling, that raising the tax on alcohol will reduce alcohol consumption and reduce alcohol problems across the population, arguably especially for young people, because young people often have less money than everybody else. On the advertising side, what do? In the US, the best we can do is to argue for tighter self-regulation. So we're in a debate with the alcohol industry about their standards for where they'll place their advertising. They currently say they will only put the ads where young people are 30% or less of the viewing, reading, listening audience, because that's roughly equivalent to the entire population under 21 in the US. Our science body that advises Congress looked at this issue in 2003 and concluded that that standard should be 15% based on the 12 to 20 population. Because although there's drinking below age 12 in the US, there's not a lot of it. It really starts to take off at age 12. 12 to 20 is the group most at risk. And the industry's current standard in the US permits them to more than double expose that group compared to the rest of the population and still be in keeping with their standard. We've modeled what would happen if they adopted a tighter standard. We estimated that on television, youth exposure would drop by 20%. The industry would save 8% of their advertising costs with virtually no effect on their ability to reach young adults. There's lots of things that our states can do. And so these are some of the things that we've worked with states to do: restricting outdoor alcohol advertising, restricting alcohol advertising on outlet windows, prohibiting it on college campuses, restricting alcohol sponsorship of civic events. It used to be you had a family event and it was a family event. Now it's almost impossible to have a street fair or a festival in the US without it being sponsored by alcohol companies. So specific things that people have done in Connecticut, Anheuser-Busch was about to sign the contract for the scoreboard at the new stadium at the University of Connecticut. A community group got to the president of the university and blocked that. In Philadelphia, they realized that 26,000 young people used public buses to get to school every day. So they banned alcohol advertising on the bus shelters. In Greater Boston, where I used to live, they were wrapping the buses and streetcars in vodka ads. And it was a 6-year campaign by a community group with a lot of young people's involvement, and they finally convinced the public transit system to stop taking alcohol advertising. What is our evidence base for what could happen if we reduce youth exposure? Mostly what we have is modeling studies, because most of the examples of what's happening in marketing is that it's expanding, not decreasing. But so one study in the US estimated that a 28% decrease in alcohol advertising would reduce monthly participation in drinking by young people from 25% to as little as 21%, binge drinking from 12% to as low as 8%. We have other studies that have estimated the number of lives that could be saved by this. WHO recommends in this area that countries set up regulatory or co-regulatory frameworks, preferably with a legislative basis, and supported when appropriate by self-regulatory measures. We don't have this in the US. Most European countries do better than we do on this front. There is more statutory basis for restricting alcohol advertising in many of the European countries than we have. Effective advertising regulation, as far as we can tell from the research and from country experience, is that the clearer and more complete the ban, the more effective it will be. Partial bans, for instance, a ban on television, will force the industry to move to another medium. This is the marketing bubble. You push it in one area and it pops out somewhere else. But those other media are often less efficient, so you will get some gain. Content bans are very difficult to enforce, but the French have a very strong content ban, and they have a system in place whereby NGOs who bring a complaint successfully get part of the money from the fine levied on the company if they violate the code. So there's an incentive for the public to bring complaints and to have public enforcement of the code. It's very clever. bans that reduce youth exposure are easier to enforce and show more promise. And again, we have many studies. Alcohol industry self-regulation, as you've seen here, is generally ineffective. Now, I'm part of the WHO team that looks at the changes in alcohol policies around the world. And so what is happening with alcohol policies in this area? We have data on 64 countries from 2002 and 2008 in, I think, 6 different areas of marketing restriction. And there's been slight movement in the direction of more restrictive activity. We've now developed some technical tools, some training packages. I've been in Latin America, I've been in Africa, and I'm headed to the Western Pacific, training governments, training countries, what you can do. What are the different instruments available for restricting alcohol advertising? Some examples of recent things. Some of you know the French have one of the strictest of the well-resourced countries. There's no advertising on television or in cinema, no sponsorship of cultural or sporting events. The law was upheld by the European Court of Justice. Thailand just passed much stricter regulations in 2008. In Thailand, basically you can only advertise your corporate name and logo, nothing else. Russia's just implemented a whole new set of restrictions, and a ban is under serious consideration in South Africa and in Ireland, and I just came from Finland, where they're considering putting back into place some restrictions that they got rid of because Finnish drinking is rising. So at the end of the day, what our studies find